In this video, we'll discuss the events that occurred in Arizona. Miche Anglin was a 22-year-old real estate agent who lived in Phoenix. On February 9, 1996, she was supposed to show the house for sale to someone she considered a potential buyer. On that day, Miche's family could not get a hold of her and eventually had to turn to the police for help. Michelle Lee Cohen was born on November 27, 1973, in Fountain Valley, California. In the following years, her family would move to Arizona. Raised by her mother and stepfather, Peggy and Larry McCall, Michelle also had two older sisters, Cindy and Christina. When Michelle was about 20 years old, she started dating Hudson Anglin. Their relationship gradually developed, and they made each other happy. When Hudson proposed to Michelle, she agreed without much hesitation. In late 1995, Michelle and Hudson got married in the presence of their families and friends. It was a special day for both of them. They planned a honeymoon and their life together, but unfortunately, 4 months after the wedding, something terrible happened to Michelle. Michelle's mother, Peggy Cohen McCall, was also a realtor. Peggy says Michelle got into the industry because of her. According to the Arizona Association of Realtors, there are no required safety measures for Arizona realtors. However, many builders and agencies provide them with various resources and safety tips. When Michelle was in the office, her husband, sisters, and mother usually kept in touch with her via her work phone. When Michelle showed houses to her clients, she always had a pager with her so that her family could reach her if necessary. But on February 9, 1996, Michelle did not answer the calls and messages of her loved ones, which was not like her usual character. She would typically always inform someone about her plans to show a house to a potential buyer. There are certain risks in the work of a realtor, and they are often higher than those in other industries. Realtors attract predators because they work alone and sometimes show properties in isolated areas. People who've been working in this field for a long time know how dangerous a job this is. Predators lure them to an isolated place, such as an empty home with no neighbors nearby, and they say they want to buy a house. But in fact, they have a completely different goal. When a realtor finds herself alone in an empty house with such a person, it can end badly. Therefore, realtors are advised to never turn their backs on the buyer, stay closer to the front door, and leave immediately if a situation doesn't feel right. That's why Michelle's family was worried when they could not contact her during the day. Michelle's sister, Cindy, was dating a guy who worked for the Phoenix police. Cindy asked him to do a welfare check at Michelle's workplace. He went to her workplace and found her car parked outside. He examined it, but saw nothing suspicious and thought Michelle was working in the office. As it turned out, Michelle had been working alone that day. But when Cindy's boyfriend entered the office, he was surprised that no one was there. The lights were on, and he could hear music playing. However, what he saw next was not a good sign. Michelle's purse and pager were on the table. It was unclear what made her leave her car, purse, and pager in an unlocked office and leave. As a result, that evening, her family contacted the police with an official missing persons report. That day, Michelle had an appointment with a potential buyer who she planned to show 3 houses. They were very close to her office, which is perhaps why she decided not to use her car. The officers who arrived inspected the office and then went to the houses that Michelle could have been showing. They conducted a preliminary search of each of the 3 model homes. During this first search, found 3 pink buttons in the master closet on the 2nd floor. The officers also observed that 2 candles in the master bathroom had been knocked over, 1 into each sink. Everything else appeared undisturbed. Cindy's boyfriend reached out to Cindy and asked if she knew what clothes Michelle was wearing that day. He wanted to know if the buttons that were found were from Michelle's clothes, but Cindy couldn't recall what Michelle was wearing that day. The officers were certain that the buttons belonged to a woman because of their color. The police then began a more thorough search of all 3 houses, especially the one where the buttons were found. Unfortunately, they found the lifeless, twisted, disrobed body of Miche Anglin under the master bed. They then examined the closet in this bedroom and found traces of seminal fluid inside. The police found broken ceramic candlesticks and articles of Michelle's clothing under the bed, as well as paint and plaster chips, which were found both under the bed and in the master bath. The autopsy did not reveal any evidence that Michelle was forced into intimacy before her death. The forensic expert concluded that the perpetrator wanted to do this and even undressed Michelle, but she resisted, and as a result, whoever attacked her strangled her, as evidenced by 3 bruises on the left side of her neck and 1 bruise on the right side. Court documents described a fight between the perpetrator and Michelle in the master closet and bath, the location of buttons and seminal fluid in the master closet, damaged candles and candlesticks in the master bath area, and paint and ceramic chips from the master bathroom in both the bathroom and under the master bed provided evidence of the scope of the struggle. Michelle's torn, knotted, and intertwined clothes indicated that the perpetrator forcibly ripped them from her body. She sustained numerous abrasions and bruises to various parts of her body. Injuries to her hands and wrists meant she was struggling and trying to defend herself. "I think of her every single day," Michelle's mother, Peggy Cohen McCall, said. "I am not able to think of the good times. I can only think of the bad times and how scared she had to have been. And I wasn't there to hold her and make her fears go away." After her daughter's death, Peggy Cohen McCall says she was let go from her job because she spoke out about the dangers women face working alone at open houses and in model homes. The first person the police decided to check for involvement in this crime was Michelle's husband, Hudson Anglin. It was an expected step on the part of the police since they always first checked the possibility that someone from the family was involved in the crime. Michelle's family did not believe that Hudson could take his wife's life. They married about 4 months before her death, were happy, and loved each other. However, the fact that Hudson and Michelle got married 4 months before her death might not mean anything. There's an example of this on this very channel. I recently published a video that tells the tragic story of Krista Alexander, a woman found dead just 4 months after her wedding. If you're not familiar with this case yet, I'll put a link that you can follow at the end of the video. And so the investigators talked to Hudson. He was shocked by Michelle's death and gave the impression of a genuinely grief-stricken man. He told them where he had been and what he had been doing that day. According to him, he visited several car dealerships looking for a family car, as he and Michelle wanted to have a child. The police checked his story and found it to be true. Therefore, they excluded Hudson from the list of suspects. He also told investigators that he did not know who could wish to harm Michelle. He assumed that she got attacked by someone she was showing the house to. The police investigated Michelle's mobile phone records and found that on February 9th, between 3:45 and 4:15 p.m., Michelle was on the phone with another sales agent, and she said she had to go because a potential buyer had just arrived at her subdivision. The fellow agent's return calls to Michelle between 4:30 p.m. and 5 p.m. went unanswered. Thus, the detectives now knew the approximate time when Michelle was attacked. But what they still needed to find out was who was she going to show these model homes to. In a phone conversation with her fellow agent, Michelle did not mention the man's name. She also did not write his name in her work notes. Because of this, the police did not have any immediate leads as to who this mysterious potential buyer was. The police started looking for possible witnesses, interviewing people living in the area where the attack on Michelle took place. A person who lived in the neighborhood and just so happened to come home from work between 4 and 4:15 p.m. on that fateful February 9th remembered seeing a white man coming down the steps of one of the 3 houses for sale and noticed a black, full-size, older model Chevrolet pickup truck with California license plates in the parking lot of the house. Prospective buyers who visited the subdivision that day between 4 and 4:30 recalled seeing a man walking from the direction of the second and third model homes and noticed that candlesticks in the third model's master bath had been knocked over into the sinks. The police appealed to the public through the media to provide any information that may be relevant to this case. They described what happened to Michelle Anglin and hoped that they would get some clues. And thankfully, it worked. Kim Ramos, a young real estate sales associate at a nearby subdivision, contacted the police and said that on February 9th, the same day the police found Michelle's lifeless body at about 2 p.m., she met with a potential buyer who drove an old black Chevrolet pickup truck. It immediately attracted Kim's attention. The house he allegedly wanted to buy was worth $500,000, but the vehicle he drove belied a more modest lifestyle. This seemed strange to her. The client asked her to accompany him to a 2-story house so that she could answer a few questions. Although Kim did accompany him to the house, she testified that she was wary of the client, partly because of how close he walked next to her. He touched her hand several times, seemingly casually. She also stated that she did not spend any appreciable time with him in the house before returning to the sales office, and believed that the client's questions about the tiled floor and the option of a fourth bedroom and den were stupid. But the most crucial thing in all of this was that Ms. Ramos asked the client to fill out a guest registration card, and he actually did it. This suspicious client listed his name as James Adams and provided his real home address and phone number. When police officers arrived at the address specified on the registration card, they saw an old black Chevrolet pickup truck with California license plates next to the house. 32-year-old James Van Adams, the pickup truck's owner, wasn't home. Police took pictures of the truck and showed them to Kim, who soon confirmed it was the same pickup truck of the strange client whom she had met a few hours before Miche Anglin's death. When investigators checked into the biography of James Van Adams, they were quite surprised. He had married and had a child, but he and his wife were currently separated. Adams had previously been convicted in California for a crime he committed in 1990. Melissa Cunningham, a young petite woman 5 feet 4 inches tall and weighing 102 pounds, was working alone as a sales agent in a new apartment complex when Adams asked her to accompany him to view the model homes that were still under construction. Adams told Melissa he was particularly interested in a 2-story model home with a master bedroom and a bathroom upstairs. Melissa spent a few minutes with Adams in the master bedroom and bathroom on the second floor. As they walked down the stairs, Melissa, who was in the lead, heard 2 thumps like footsteps, felt a shove, and then fell down to the floor below. Adams apologized, saying he had tripped on a nail. While they were both looking for said nail, Adams grabbed Melissa from behind, putting one hand around her neck and choking her, while twisting her head to the left with his other hand. He told her that he would break her neck if she started screaming. He then dragged her down the hallway into the kitchen, threw her on the floor, and began to tear off her clothes. Fortunately, Melissa managed to escape. She memorized the license plates of Adams' truck and contacted the police. Adams was soon arrested. He spent only 2 years in prison for this attack. It did not take investigators assigned to Miche Anglin's death long to discover this previous failed attack from Adams. The detectives obtained a search and arrest warrant, returned to Adams' home, and took him in for questioning. He refused to talk, was very nervous, and had injuries on his face, under his eye. As they knew that these injuries could have resulted from Miche defending herself with the missing candlesticks, which were eventually found, they took samples of James's DNA, blood, and hair. Kim Ramos, the one who had met with him just a few hours before the discovery of Miche's body, identified Adams and reported that when she showed him the house, there were no injuries, bruises, or scratches on his face. Adams tried to get out of this situation by saying that he had injured his face later while working on his pickup truck. Unfortunately for Adams, during the investigation it became known that he left work on February 9th around noon and did not return after calling in sick due to car troubles. Adams' employer and his colleague testified that the next time they saw him, he had a facial injury and a black eye that weren't there on February 8th or 9th. Now let's see what the court documents say about the analysis of Adams' DNA, blood, and hair samples. Let me remind you that the police had a sample of seminal fluid that they found on the carpet in the closet. So, the documents say, both the Phoenix Crime Laboratory and the Department of Public Safety Laboratory conducted DNA testing of the carpet sample. Although the initial results excluded Van Adams as the contributor, retesting the sample by the crime lab produced contradictory results, including him as a contributor. Additional testing performed by DPS verified the latter result. Although the police conducted extensive finger and footprinting of the model home, none of the prints found matched those of Adams. Charged with taking the life of Miche Anglin, James Van Adams denied his involvement in the crime. His trial began on July 1, 1997. Prosecutors presented their evidence that Adams was responsible for Miche's death. The prosecution's witness was Kim Ramos, who believed that she was lucky because before attacking Miche, Adams intended to do the same to her. She also stated that she did not believe he intended to buy a house because of his clothing, the vehicle he drove, and the questions he asked about the flooring and fourth bedroom, which she characterized as stupid. The state also provided evidence regarding interactions between Adams and other sales agents several years earlier in California, several months earlier in Briarwood, and hours before the attack on Michelle Anglin. Susan Wright, an employee of Homes by Dave Brown, said she had several face-to-face meetings with Adams at the Briarwood subdivision and numerous phone conversations with him while at Briarwood and another subdivision to which she got transferred later. Her first meeting with Adams was on September or October 1995, when he asked her to show him a house for sale. Susan remembered that Adams was standing too close to her, and that although he indicated he had questions about the house, he did not ask her a single question when they arrived to view it. Upon the arrival of other potential buyers, they immediately left the house and returned to the office. Then, on November 5, 1995, Adams again visited her office and filled out the guest registration card as Jim Adams. According to Susan, Adams repeatedly visited her office and called her, each time asking her out on dates. Thus, it became clear that Adams had a repetitive plan of action. Michelle Anglin, Susan Wright, Kim Ramos, and Melissa Cunningham, whom he attacked in California in 1990, had similar external features. They also all worked alone. All of the incidents happened in the afternoon. In the cases of Melissa Cunningham and Kim Ramos, Adams requested that they accompany him upstairs in a two-story house. Evidence found near Michelle Anglin's body allowed the prosecutor to conclude that he had made the same request to her. Adams attacked Michelle Anglin and Melissa Cunningham by putting his right arm around their necks. In both cases, the attacker ripped off the victim's clothes and tried to satisfy himself. It meant that James Van Adams was preparing for a crime. He kept an eye on potential victims, choosing those who worked alone and could show him houses for sale without witnesses. Michelle's family was present at the trial, and this process became another challenge for them. The judge even had to remove Michelle's mother, Peggy Cohen McCall, from the courtroom because she couldn't contain her emotions and screamed at Adams. But Adams seemed to enjoy it. Seeing Michelle's family suffering, he periodically grinned. However, his mood changed when the jury found him guilty on all counts. On July 14, 1997, the court sentenced him to death. But don't hurry to end this video just yet. Something else happened in this case that may surprise you. Adams used all legal attempts to appeal the verdict. Even though he declared his innocence at the trial in 1997, after the court sentenced him to death, he argued in his appeal that the facts of the incident in California in 1990, when Melissa Cunningham managed to escape, confirmed that he did not plan to take the life of Michelle Anglin. Adams allegedly did not act intentionally. He argued that during the attack in California, he simply pinned his victim by the neck, trying to make intimate contact with her. His argument continued that considering the previous incident, the jury could conclude he did not intend to take Michelle Anglin's life. Adams concluded that although he could have known that Michelle would die of asphyxiation, he had not foreseen this outcome, and that is why the jury could conclude that he had committed a premeditated second-degree crime, not a first-degree deprivation of life. All attempts by James Van Adams to appeal the death sentence were unsuccessful. Perhaps that is why he decided to voluntarily leave this world on March 14, 2005. He was found dead in his prison cell, and doctors were not able to resuscitate him. Michelle Anglin died of asphyxia. The cause of Adams' death was also asphyxia. However, in this case, he did it to himself. Michelle's family was delighted when they heard the news. I want everybody to tip their glass to Michelle tonight in honor of her. I am ecstatic. This is a good day, said Michelle's mother, Peggy. Michelle's husband, Hudson Anglin, died in 2002 at the age of 29. His death was not of a criminal nature. Share your opinion about this case in the comments, and thank you for watching this video to the end.